And welcome everybody to the inaugural episode of the Awkwardly Big Dice podcast. I am your wise wizard host, Dan, and I am with my co-host and the savior, my savior, from the life of the Forever DM, our wonderful warlock, Rob.
Evening.
Was that a satisfactory intro for you?
Sure it was.
Well, we have a few topics we are going to discuss today, but to give everybody a little insight into us, as it is our first episode, we'll go through sort of our favourite class, basically, give you an idea of why it's our favourite class, and that should give you a little insight into us as players, and maybe a little bit of us as DMs as well. But as I said, I am Dan, formerly a Forever DM and a lover of the wizard class. Many reasons why I love the wizard class, but none more so than the number of spells you get to pick from and its versatility. I mean, arguably one of the most balanced classes in
I'd agree.
in Dungeons and Dragons. There's a spell to counter everything, including counter spell and such, or dispel magic if you're looking to dispel a magical effect. All the subclasses have enough variety, in my opinion, to make every level up feel unique, and to make the game seem fun. Whether it be, as I played last, the divination wizard, because divination wizards can predict the future, and you team up their portent with silvery barbs, and you pretty much always got a good chance of getting the DM to roll a few times extra on those attacks.
Kind of confirm as a DM that was quite irritating. Definitely. Yeah, I suppose my favourite class would probably be the Warlock. For those of my friends that I play with, that would definitely not come as a surprise.
No.
I think I like it because it gives such good roleplay opportunities. You've always got that patron, something that grants you power, whether it's a devil, a celestial being, a great old mystic entity, a creature from the Fae. Many different types of things can grant you power, and I think that's the beauty of it because the different subclasses to it can really diversify it. Similar to the wizard in many ways.
Oh yeah.
Don't get too many spells, but you do get the spell slots back on the short rests. But it's got that all intoxicating cantrip that no other class gets, the Eldritch Blast.
The king of cantrips, one might say.
Yeah. And the
Well,
customization of the applications as well really make it unique every time you play it.
there's some debate to say that maybe guidance is a close contender, because it's useful outside of its use outside of combat, but it's pretty. Obviously, you're not going to go for it during a fight, whereas Eldritch Blast has that
Yeah.
power, and it
King of
scales,
combat trips.
amazingly. Like like guidance doesn't, so it leaves us out on that.
I think that's the thing about guidance as well. Like you do feel a bit silly, like every time someone's told to roll this check or roll that check to go guidance, it gets a bit tiresome after a while. So I think that's probably why I don't like that one as much. But I always love Eldritch Blast. It's always satisfying.
It is. What's your? Do you have a favorite patron with?
That's like asking me to name my last meal. I think I've had a lot of fun playing the Great Old One. As somebody who is a big fan of Lovecraft and Eldritch horror and those sorts of genres of literature, it's great to dive into the layers of insanity that can bring in role play. That is quite a challenge. But then I've played the undead magpie fits with the Reaper as a patron. I've played Hexblades traditionally and non-traditional. Um, I'd say I do always like the flavour that the Great Old One gives you, though.
Yeah, it's different, right? It's not typical. I guess the stereotype a little bit would be the fiend patron, right?
Yes,
So
deal with the devil.
and there is something. Obviously, it's supposed the Great Old One is supposed to be that alien that the Cthulhu's example. I think it gives in the player's
Yeah,
handbook. So and it's the alien nature of it can give you so much choice, so much freedom. When you do choose that subclass.
it's that doorway to madness that's so enticing, especially if you've got a good DM that will really bounce off you with the RP aspect and really enhance the overall playing experience. Plus, there's nothing like telepathically tormenting your party.
Yeah,
That's
telepathy
always
is always fun. Or it's just a bit like well, several of the spells that can be used to read minds. They're always great fun, which is why you got the sorcerer subclass that allows you to the I was it the aberrant might is it aberrant
remind.
might that allows you to do that sort of stuff as a subclass as well. But no, it's not a warlock; it's a sorcerer, and sorcerers are different and not as good in my opinion. But that's my personal
I did
opinion.
multi-class spell with Warlock.
Yeah, yeah. We well then I think we're everyone should understand now the sort of play as well. Someone who likes to smash out one cantrip a lot, an occasional little flavor of spells, and someone who just likes a variety in his choice of spells, who spends a year looking at his spell list, deciding what he wants to do from his spell book. But since we're at the beginning and we just started,
Mm.
we shall start with some tips for new starters. Is a good shout. Uh, why don't you take this one away, Rob?
Well, it's such a broad subject, but I would say a really good tip for new starters is to just not be afraid to make mistakes. Um, I'd say now that me and my good friend Dan are veterans,
Yeah,
both DMs and players, very experienced, and we still make mistakes. So I think that's probably one of the key parts of it. Every game will be different. Every DM will be different. It's important to find that group that works for you as well, and understand what everybody at the table wants out of the game, and what kind of, I suppose, story the DM is attempting to tell with the collaborative help of their players. Um, but don't be afraid to make mistakes. And something, if you want to achieve something, just say, "Can I do this?" And the DM will hopefully engage.
yeah, no, yeah. It's you make mistakes. Everyone does. I do every day. I will do when we start our next campaign. No doubt there'll be there'll be mistakes, but you even as a if you're a new dungeon master, you will make mistakes. You aren't going to remember all the many pages of the player's handbook and the dungeon master's guide and all the various stats from the monster manual. Never mind everything you've
Mm.
got in Tasha's and Xanath's and now Big B's and all the many other books that are now
Yeah,
Fizzbands and all these like you're not going to remember everything. So be um keep that in mind when when you are starting out. And if you've got a good DM, uh, they shouldn't have any problem with answering questions that you have,
mm,
um, so that you can learn. And you never know, the DM might learn something new. I definitely learned something new. Like we were playing in our not the last campaign because the last campaign we did with Strahd, the one before that I DM'd and we got onto smite spells, not the actual feature
Oh,
of the paladin, the smite, but the actual like wrathful smite and thunderous smite and these sort of things. And there was a whole debate that we ended up having around its usage and the language that is of course in that.
and then of course you find an even larger debate on Reddit,
Yeah, yeah, you
so,
do.
which muddies the waters of those sorts of decisions. Any other new tips for new players?
Yeah. Um, One of my key things, and this might just be me and the players I play with or the way that I think, but I think that flavor is much more important than new players realize. So a lot of new players will come along with an idea of they want to play this. A lot of time it's like a character from a movie or a video game or a TV show
Mm,
or a book or whatever it is. They have this idea and they think, well, I've got to find the perfect class and the perfect subclass to make it work. And you'd be surprised how much you can make it work with whatever you like, whatever fits. Um, and I think it's like the example I always think about is a pirate, for example. Someone comes in and says, "I want to play like a swashbuckling pirate,"
yeah,
and then so they automatically look through it all and they see the word swashbuckler right next to rogue in the subclasses. That isn't always going to be the best choice for you, depending on what you want to do and how you want to have other aspects of your character's background. It might be that you prefer, or you might like some magic to be thrown in. So you might think, oh well, I could go play a College of Swords bard, or I want to have a bit more connection to the sea and the gods of the sea. You might want to go Tempest cleric. Um, that can
or a
introduce
warlock
that.
of the Fathomless.
Or you warlock of yeah, exactly. Always warlock. Always bring it around. You could even you just I would say you could play any wizard in some degree and make it work. Um, Rob has a character that he's played once, who is a blade singer, who
Yeah,
kind of not a pirate but definitely a swashbuckler. Um,
it's pirate vibes
that's pirate
for
vibes.
sure
Yeah,
with Sama.
but it's I think it's important to remember that the the class that you choose is the mechanics that you're going to be implementing and some of the features and things you can do. But a lot of what you want as a character is just what we call flavor.
The
Um,
limit is your creativity at the end of the day
it
on that one.
is, it is. And yeah, it's a game about creativity, about imagination.
I think another tip for any budding new starters would be don't get too bogged down in the rules,
Hmm.
especially if you're the only new person at the table. Uh, just it's always about just what's fun. Um, be aware that you are there to have fun, engage with the party, engage with the table, so to say, um, and look for opportunities to do that. D&D isn't just about combat. D&D is made up of three pillars. If anybody's ever heard of those, there is combat. That's obviously one of the biggest pillars, being that the player's handbook is probably about 70% made up of combat rules. But there's also exploration and roleplay. So always bear that in mind that it's not a video game. It's not just about running up to things and hitting them. Uh, there are more than one ways to skin a cat, I should say.
Yeah.
Although I know Steph wouldn't like
But there is that doesn't mean that you shouldn't. Some players will. It is, combat is their thing, and that is the thing they're always going to
that.
enjoy, and they just want to go through dungeons and kill stuff and get loot. And if you want to do
Nothing
that,
wrong with
there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. Go for it, have fun.
that.
It isn't the way I like to play, or I like it'll even you're not going to find it in the way that I DM. I love story and character, and that's always what I'm going to push. Um, I like to give my players a lot of freedom. Sometimes my love of the story will slightly railroad, but I think you do need a balance between that sort of freedom and railroading. Um, but there's nothing wrong with liking a combat. And on the other side of the coin, if you're big into roleplay and you don't really care for the combat mechanics, go for it. Yeah, it's great. Uh, do that. There's plenty of opportunities and plenty of things. There's ways to even sort of simplify some of the combat, um, and just sort of minimize that side of it. And especially if you speak to the DM and everyone's in agreement, that's obviously very, very important that everyone agrees that that's the sort of thing you want to play.
Now,
Um,
I suppose there's an idea. We've talked a little bit about tips for new
hmm.
players, but every DM's new at some point. Have you got any tips you'd give to new DMs?
uh, it would be great if I could say DMs should play first. Um, but that's not, that wasn't my experience.
The
So,
old chicken and egg situation.
yeah, it'd be great if you could play. Um, if you could play
I think
first. But I would. I think about what it is you want from the game as much because you're gonna get bogged down in what your players want and what they expect from you, and that can be a lot. That can be a lot of pressure if everyone's like puts a lot of expectations. And look, I play with players that don't put any pressure and they're good and they're free and they're happy to go with whatever. Um, but don't put that pressure on yourself to come up with something perfect. Not especially not the first time. It's probably even better not to go full homebrew because a lot of DMs you hear about like go homebrew the first time. I didn't. I went with Lost Mines, of Fandelver
classic.
classic. As the start is in the starter kit, it's the sort of perfect start adventure. You go with the Goblin Caves at the beginning, and you lose a couple of players to the old Hobgoblin, whatever he is. No, he's a Bugbear.
But
Bugbear
yeah, it's bugbear.
Clog or
The
something he's called.
the infamous bugbear has killed
Yeah,
many a players. I think that bugbear has probably killed more players than any other creature or
agreed.
BBEG or anything. It's funny you say that actually. Maybe don't consider going full homebrew like, and writing your own adventure from the start. My main experiences comes from simply doing that. Up until running Curse of Strahd, my first experience as a DM was playing in a homebrew, uh, DMing a homebrew campaign that I had written. My first experience as a player, my first real experience as a player, I did actually play 2 sessions, I think it was, of Lost Mines of Phandelver. And then it kind of just drifted off, unfortunately, as some games do, and that was many, many, many years ago. My first real playing experience, I would say, was homebrew. And yeah, I agree. It's certainly like jumping off the deep end if you're a DM and you're doing that, and it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. And the DM we had at the time did a great job, but they were definitely a collaborative effort as well. I think if you've got the group that will work with, then fantastic. But I'd say that considering I've just finished Curse of Strahd as the DM, having finished another of my own campaigns, probably a year or so prior to that, the amount I learned from running a book campaign was invaluable, completely invaluable, for sure.
It's something to be said as well about having that pre-written campaign and the time saving. Like, Rob knows that I am someone who over prepares. My lore documents are extensive. My
A little bit.
my campaign notes are enormous, and I've got better. I don't know if better is the correct way to view it. I have shrunk them down to try and stick to sort of smaller bullet points, and we did just run a mini adventure where I had very little notes whatsoever beyond the maps. Shout out to Incarnate. Um, but uh,
Do love Incarnate.
I do, yeah. You can do some good work on that. Um, but yeah, don't get bogged down in preparation because, like I do, because you'll spend ages doing it, a long time, and then something might you prepare and think, oh, this is a really cool idea. This is great. I want to throw this at my players. It's going to be great when it happens, and then they completely circumvent it, and it doesn't happen, or it doesn't go the way you think because your players just all gang up on it and one shot it. like in a surprise round.
Oh yeah, I've had that happen to me as DM, and I've done that as a player.
And
Uh,
sometimes it's great. I'm never going to say it's a bad thing because it's great, and it means the players have been imaginative and creative in it. But when you've just got like 3 pages on a Word doc of like stuff that's supposed to happen and things that are supposed to go down, and it doesn't happen, you're like, oh, okay. But with a
yeah,
pre-written thing like Curse of Strahd, um, there's none of that, and it's pre-prepared, and you don't have to spend the time. You can spend the time focusing on other areas of
yeah. You can look for areas where you can adapt, and because you don't have to do all the work, it means that you can really devote time to tweaks that will make sense to fit the campaign to your players, and that's definitely something I tried to do when I was running that particular campaign. And going back to what you said about over preparing, I think running homebrew is a little bit like that anyway. Um, my first campaign, I think I had to take 2 prolonged breaks because it just working a full time job, writing a campaign, and not trying to go crazy. Yeah, I couldn't do it. We got to points where I was like, right, guys, that's pretty much everything. I had the stamina to write. Can I have a few months off, please? Can we do something else for a while?
mhm.
Luckily, the group dynamic we had at the time was actually really good for that. We had a couple of us that were similar. So we kind of leapfrogged each other a little bit. We played in one campaign for probably about a year and then went back to mine for a year or so. And it did work well, but it did mean that there was always that kind of first 2 or 3 sessions when we were getting back to the campaign where it was a little bit, uh, yeah, a little bit jerky, a little bit of a
Mhm.
bumpy ride when we were everybody was trying to get back into the characters that they'd left and trying to kind of mentally separate themselves from other characters they played, and it can be difficult. So I think finding that balance in the amount of preparation for the story writing is absolutely going to be a key point.
Yeah. Well, we had our luck when we were playing the Curse of Strahd,
Mm.
in that we had a player, my brother, who is away a lot, so we can't put the same amount of dedication, I guess you want to call it, to into playing D&D every week as we do play every week. Um,
Doesn't have the availability, unfortunately.
yeah. But it meant that when he was home, we still wanted to play D&D with him. So we had that opportunity there where we played Strahd during the time he wasn't there, and it was great. And he was there at the beginning, so we had to phase his character out a little bit, and I think Rob did a great job. Um, but then when he was coming back, we still wanted to play D&D. We wanted to play D&D with him, but bringing him in and out of a campaign, it just doesn't work because you don't know how things are going to change or evolve, and it's just not feasible long term. So it gave us opportunity to just do one shots, which then give Rob a break or
Yeah,
the DM a break from DMing, prevents burnout, and then I would jump in and we do a one shot or something like that, or a 2 shot as it often was, and sometime on I think the first occasion like a 4 shot and two separate occasions. Um, but yeah, preventing burnout, DM burnout. Uh,
yeah,
Doing that sort of rotation works really well. Um, and we're probably going to be doing that a little bit with our own game that we play. Um, we're always very open to the idea of. I'm sure Rob would have no issue if I was like, need a bit of a break. Can you run a one shot for a
yeah,
week?
easy.
And if it's
So
in the other way around, of course, any day. Um, so that's yeah, not a problem. But should we move on to our next topic? We've done new players, new DMs even we did.
yeah,
Next one we prepared was Spell of the Week, is what I've got on my list. I don't know what you've chosen, you don't know what I've chosen.
nope.
Uh,
Go on, you go first.
you want me to go first? Alright. Uh, I went for I'm just gonna make sure. I'm gonna bring it up and make sure that I do give the right information because I don't want to be like talking about it and going, that was completely wrong. How embarrassing. Uh, but yes, was person. So mine. See if you can guess it. It's a third level spell.
Okay.
It's a react.
Fireball.
No, it's a reaction spell.
Well, third level reactions, there's counter spell, which is the obvious one.
Yeah, it's counter spell. You got it
Yeah.
first time. Yeah, I would say counter spell is my spell of the week because I loved it playing a wizard. Like, you are the bane of any sort of mage and enemy monster, whatever you want to call it. Because you can just like that switch off their spell. Obviously, the higher level spells, and you can cast it at higher levels, and it's still effective. It still stays effective. Um, it's a reaction. There aren't a lot of reaction like spells in general.
Not
Um,
many.
and being able to just like have Strahd point a finger at you, and you're like, he's gonna freaking fireball us, isn't he? And just going, nope, I don't think so. Counterspell is great. Yeah, it maybe encouraged a little bit of the player versus DM mentality, but it's fun, and if you and the
With
DM are on good
certain,
terms, it's not an issue.
yeah, I would say with certain bad guys in campaigns or certain encounters, a little bit of that works well, especially with the right kind of players and the right kind of creatures. Yeah, I can confirm as a DM when Dan, as his wizard Emmerich, would counterspell the spells that I would be casting against the party. He saved them many a time because spells can be quite impactful to the
Yeah,
combat situation, I would say. I think there was definitely a couple of spells where you just countered them and it was likely that it was going to lead to some player death. So that's yeah, it's definitely up there with spells. Mm. Anything else you want to add about that particular spell, or do you want me to go on to
I
mine?
mean, you can read it, and in it, just everything about it is great. Like, so it's just semantic, so you can do it with your hands tied behind your back. Like,
Yeah,
oh, sorry, you
and
can't do it. You can do it with your mouse tape shut. Semantic is
yeah,
not word. Semantic is signs. So you can do it with your mouse tape shut. Uh, we just need your hands, I guess. You could do it with your feet or whatever, however it is you uh cast spells semantically. It doesn't have any components.
no,
Really, it just requires you to be able to see a creature within 60 feet who's casting a spell. Um, It's great. It's instantaneous. 60 feet is great range for something like
it
that.
is.
You could easily see some like a game designer hampering that and just going 60 feet a bit far, but it's great.
I
There's
mean,
there's no save
I've played
against it.
against no,
Like,
there isn't. I've played against something that had. I don't know if it was homebrew or if it was that the DEM at the time had improved it, but I played against something that had a 75-foot counter range, and that was toxic.
it's
Yeah,
ridiculous.
when you know the spells, when you know how a spell works,
Hmm.
and you're playing an intelligent person that also has that spell, so you feel justified in knowing the range
Hmm.
and staying at the correct range to make sure that you don't get countered in response to your spells. To suddenly be countered is like, oh no, it's a
Yeah.
scary moment. Yeah, that was terrifying. But then again, that's another side to the counter spell is that wizards are intelligent people. Oh, I say some spellcasters. Wizards, for the most part, being the intelligence-based caster, is sometimes that range can also be its weakness because it's a good range, but it's not the longest range. And if the caster is able to get outside of that 60-foot reach, then they do get free reign on their spells.
Hmm.
But I would only justify that as a DM, like using that advantage when you know that the person who is doing that would have a really good understanding of the spell,
Hmm.
would understand its limitations.
Like a wizard themselves, basically.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Like if it's a good old wizard off. Uh,
That sounds wrong.
a wizard should know better. But yeah, my favourite spell, I suppose, because we're doing spell of the week and we're doing the first episode, it's probably going to be our favourite spells that have come out. That's what I was expecting.
Hmm.
Is I don't know if you've seen me cast this because I cast this a lot as Arthur,
Hmm.
my first warlock. Um, it is a little bit of a high level spell,
Okay.
but he has been above level 9 for some time, which
Okay.
is when you get level 5 spells.
Hmm.
And it is I can't even say it. Synaptic static.
Yeah.
Now,
Okay.
this is probably one of those lesser known spells.
Hmm.
It's an area affecting spell. It's
Always
got a
good.
20-foot
Aries.
radius sphere, which is that a little bit smaller or is that the size of a fireball? It's around
20
about the
foot
shape of a fireball
radius. Yeah,
spell.
I think it's about the same as Fireboy.
Yeah, I always forget if it's 20 or 30 radius. So 20-foot radius, that's a nice big
It's
area.
good.
You're going to hit more than one
It's
thing.
40 feet all, all together. So,
Exactly, yeah. And you're going to cause anything caught in that area as you psychically scream towards it to take an intelligence save, which is probably one of the lower statistics that you tend to find on a lot of creatures, unless you're fighting quite a niche area of creatures that are
yeah.
quite intelligence focused. Um, Although it is 2 levels higher than Fireball, so the damage doesn't quite keep up because it is the same damage as Fireball. It's 8d6, which can max out at quite a lot of damage, but it is psychic damage. So whereas Fire is as a type, as a damage type, is fairly heavily resisted, depending on what you're fighting. Um, Psychic is probably one of the least resisted damage types. And I think because you're projecting this like mental scream towards this location. I really love that it's psychic damage that they need to make an intelligence save. Now, if they fail the intelligence save, there is an added extra caveat, and this is where this spell gets particularly juicy. After a failed save, a target has muddled thoughts for 1 minute. Now, for those of you less versed on D&D, not many fights last longer than 30 seconds in game time, as a round of turns is 6 seconds. So 1 minute is a nice long duration for that. It's going to basically last for the fight. During that time, any time that it would do an ability check or an attack roll, it rolls a d6 and subtracts that number from that. So if you rolled a 20 to hit, and I rolled a d6 and said, I've rolled a 5, subtract 5 from that. It's just it's just really impeding the
Yes.
creatures. And on more than one occasion, if Ross is watching, he will know that it completely swung the tide of the fight,
Hmm.
dramatically so. And there's nothing that makes you feel more powerful than just screaming mentally at things and then them just not being able to hit anything, to pass any checks. Sadly, it doesn't affect saves apart from concentration saves, which makes sense because your thoughts are muddled, so you're going to struggle to concentrate on anything. But I think it's for me, it's a spell that it's powerful. It affects a nice big area. It has a prolonged effect, which nope does not require concentration,
Great.
and it's
Always
got
good.
really good flavour. So I think for me, it checks all the boxes
Yeah.
of what I love from a damaging spell. It's not just damage; it has additional effects and such good flavour on that. I really like that one personally.
Yeah, it's great because, like, it says intelligence checks, right?
Yeah,
On it, on saves. Likelihood a lot of the creatures you're thinking like mind flayers, right? Are the
yeah.
intelligence-based creatures are often resistant to things like psychic damage. One of very very rare resistances. So you're not going to use it against that, but anything else, like most of your typical monsters, your ogres and your giants and stuff, don't
Mm.
typically have high intelligence,
There
which is
is a
great.
weakness to the spell as well. If something has such low intelligence, it might not be affected by the spell. So if something has 2 intelligence or lower, which is quite rare, let's be honest,
Hmm.
um, it would just completely ignore the spell because it's already so stupid, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. You're looking at things like beasts, basically. Anything from
Yeah,
likely from a beast,
money
the beast category
things.
is going to be down there. A rat or so or something. or some sort of bird, perhaps. Non-speaking creatures. Things that are likely to not be sentient, so don't have thoughts. It's a logic behind it, I assume.
Yeah, completely. I don't think it's particularly come up when I've cast that spell. I know there are some more psychic spells that don't affect creatures that have 4 intelligence or lower, and I have found that I've come up against that barrier more often. But no, I've never had an issue casting it, to be honest.
Okay. You're saying as I should expect it in future games.
I'm not sure if I even took it on Fitz because I use it so much on Arthur. Hmm. No, I don't think you'll need to expect it.
Okay, okay. Well, not from you anyway.
I mean, I can't control what anybody else takes. Perhaps
That's
they're
true.
listening and taking notes.
Maybe
Who
they are.
knows?
All right. Well, I think I think they were both valid choices as spells of the week. Though I
Yeah,
learned something, so yours can have top privileged position as the true spell of the week.
saying that your spell would quite easily beat mine if I was within 60 feet. So
Yeah, if it was upcast.
I just have to wait until you've used your reaction already.
Yeah, yeah. Try and get me to use silvery barbs.
Yeah, perfect.
That's
Mm.
another one. Which again is a I've heard of people banning silvery barbs from their games. I'm like, why? It's fine.
Yeah,
It's a reaction.
I don't
You
think
can do it once. Like,
I don't think I would feel the need to ban it unless I was at a table of 5 or 6 players that all had it and all had multiple level 1 spell slots. Like if it's unlikely that a warlock's going to blow their spell slot on it.
I no.
Um, I think I probably took it on Arthur and maybe Fitz too. If I can't remember if Fitz had access to it. Um, but no,
Mm,
it's just you only get 2 spell slots up until level 11, so it's uh, it's a bit of a big one to blow that on.
agreed.
But your sorcerers and your wizards and your
Aye.
bards.
Yeah, bards. Bards go shout for bards. But it works exceptionally well with bards. Like it was designed for bards because it fits with that vicious mockery and the dissonant whispers vibes.
Yeah,
Definitely a good shout. Um, it can go in third place, silvery barbs. Then I don't have to you do it again, or until we want to use it again because we run out of spells to discuss. Um,
that'll take us a while. There's like how many? 600, 700
there's a
spells.
lot of spells if you include everything from every book. Like you just chose what was from Xanathus, I think. Uh,
I think it was.
it's synaptic static, whereas cow spells from Play's Handbook.
Oh yeah.
Cool. So monsters that you've always wanted to use, as it's written in our notes. Basically, well, some of our favourite monsters that we've never really got to throw at players from a DM's perspective, or I guess from a perspective of never got to fight either. Um, I have a good one for this, I think, and I think yours, from what you told me, is a good shout as well.
Mhm.
We'll see what your explanation is to why you think it's a good shout.
Yeah, do you want me
Um,
to go first? Or-
you can go first if you like.
Yes, the creature that I've always wanted to fight against and always wanted to use as a DM is the Beholder,
As seen on screen.
as seen on screen, which, as you can see, is essentially a floating head. Um, I think one of the reasons I like it is it reminds me of there's a creature in Doom, the old shooter game,
Yeah,
that looks like it. Not with the eyeballs around it, but other than that, quite similar. So I think there's a nostalgic element. But then, like once you've read its rules as well, they're quite fascinating. I will be honest, I'm quite ignorant to the lore of them. I only tend to read the lore of creatures if I'm running a book campaign because I like to make my own stuff up as well. Mm. But it's a floating head. It's got a giant eyeball, some pretty nasty looking teeth, and loads of other eyeballs kind of attached to the end of. tentacles. Um, Now it can shoot various beams out of those eyeballs,
It does.
10 in total, and every turn the DM can choose. Although I'd probably be quite tempted to play it chaotically and just roll some dice, see what happens.
Yeah.
It can choose. You can choose up to 3 of those beams. It can bite people with those vicious teeth and be pretty damaging. Um, the eye rays can be all kinds of things. There's a disintegration ray, which is just 10 d8 force damage, and if it puts a player to 0 hit points, they become a pile of fine grey dust.
They
So
do.
dry cast Revivify on that. It's Death Ray, Petrification Ray, Sleep Ray, and Innovation Ray. The target creature must make a DC Constitution saving throw, taking 8d8 necrotic damage on a failed save or half as much on a successful one. A lot of them are just damage, but there's Charm Ray, Paralyzing Ray, Fear Ray, Slowing Ray. So not only do they do damage, I think there's quite a telling theme here. I like things that have multiple uses.
Yeah.
I like the Swiss Army knife of
Hmm.
spells and creatures. Um, and they also have an anti magic cone. The Beholder's central eye, so the big central one, uh, creates an area of anti magic.
It
In this
does.
anti magic fields, as with the anti magic field spell, it's the same effect in a 150-foot cone, which by the way is huge.
Yes.
At the start of each of its turns, the beholder decides which way the cone faces and whether the cone is active. The area works against the beholder's own eye rays, so he needs to be careful how he uses it, but I just think that's a really interesting creature. And I imagine extremely challenging if you come up against it. I would like to see
I
how
agree.
our group would handle it.
I agree. I had a one shot that we did that was the potential for you to come across a beholder.
Oh, I know which one you're gonna be. It'll be now.
Yeah, it was the bank heist. It was the bank heist. It was in one of the vaults. You could have come across the beholder. And that would have been fun. As probably as punishing as what you eventually fought as well, with the vampire. Maybe more so depending. You weren't a particularly magic heavy party, so the anti-magic field only has
It would have definitely have missed Susie's. Was she a wizard or a sorceress?
wizard, I think, necromancer.
Yeah, she is. Yeah, she would have not been great against it. I mean, I'd have been better against the vampire if I'd have remembered that monks can just break charm on themselves.
Yeah, well, as we said before,
So
everybody makes mistakes.
we do, we do.
But I agree, like beholders are great. Like they're like iconic
Yeah,
D&D monster. Like
yeah,
yes,
iconic.
iconic. Woo. First pun of the day. First pun of the night. Um, but yes, I agree. Great. I mean, I'm just looking at its stat block now, and I'm like, its passive perception is freaking great. The little
Yeah,
thing, right? Its passive perception is 22. Your rogues are gonna get past it. Maybe your
yeah.
monks, but that paladin in his chunky armor, clanging around. Nah, ain't getting past that. A group check, even yeah, even with a like, if you're doing it as a group check, yeah, going unnoticed. He's got lots of eyes. It makes sense, but
You're
like
gonna need pass without grace to get past that.
without doubt, yeah. And then even then, like that's still
Even
gonna
then, if
be a
he's looking
struggle
at you,
because you've still got to require what like the majority of your players to pass a DC 22. If that's only if he and that's only if he's passive. He's not
yeah.
actively looking. So like you probably got a better shot if he's actively looking for you.
Let's have a look at his stat block. I had it up a second ago, but I've closed it.
Is but then I don't know because like yeah, you may be because he's still got plus 12 in his perception. So he's a nasty fella. Um, he cannot. He only flies. So,
Yeah,
but and he doesn't move very fast. But with those
no,
eye stalks, those eyes, he don't need to move. He can stay where he
Well, you
is. Just chomp if he wants with his bite, but also got great legendary. He's got legendary actions as well, 3 of them to use. Got love some legendary actions. He also has layer actions if you want to play him within a layer, and also great because as we said before, like with
don't.
we talked about the great old one and the alienness of it all.
Yeah.
Uh, he's an aberration, and aberrations are I always call them abominations because I always forget that it's aberration, but he's an aberration.
They're
Um,
abominable.
they're abominable, 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 that word you just said. Um, but
Oh,
they
look. High intelligence saving throws. Synaptic static might not work very well.
won't work great on aberrations because he's got good intelligence, decent intelligence. He's a +3. Um,
Mm.
so yeah, they're aberrations, creatures from the astral plane, right?
Mm.
So they all look weird and they all look fun, just like Mr. Eyeball.
Oh, and they have lair actions and regional traits and effects.
Yeah, yeah,
That's another reason why I love them. 'Cause I like things that have their own little lair, that have lair actions. That's always fun to just get additional options to throw at your players.
indeed.
But over to you. What is your monster of the week?
My monster
Mm.
that I would love to talk about, and you already know, is the Elder Brain Dragon. Because who doesn't love a big Mind Flayer dragon?
I mean, just look at the picture.
Enough said, right? It's
Yeah,
great.
that's just
It's
gross.
obviously it's a really high challenge rating if you're a DM that pays attention to challenge rating. Um, it's 22, so it's up there. It's a big beast. Uh, it flies, which is great. Everyone loves a good fly. Its speed alone, like just it's got 40-foot movement on the ground, so it's keeping up with a lot of players. Though I guess if you got to be level 25 in this bad boy, um, or near that range.
No, maybe
Uh,
15. So
yeah. Um, he has legendary resistances, which you gotta love a monster with legendary resistances. Um,
Faraday.
but also he has the old tadpole brine breath, which is why I like him. And even I was reading this right when I was looking it up. Even if you have to make a save when it sprays you.
Yep.
Even if you succeed, you are still tadpoled.
Yep.
like, yeah,
That's why
that's
it's notoriously terrifying.
yeah, rightfully so. Like it's not only is it the elder brain of the Ithalid, the hive mind stuffed into a dragon with loads of tentacles and a scary looking tongue. It sprays uh, tadpoles all over you. It is nasty and it does lots of psychic damage. So even you totem barbarians, you're getting smashed by that damage. Can't resist that.
Just reading its attacks, even just its attacks are vicious. So like
Mhm.
multi-attack, the dragon makes one bite attack, two claw attacks, and one tentacle
Mhm.
attack. The bite, it's a standard bite. It does a bit of extra psychic damage. It'll be painful. I mean, it's plus 15 to hit, so it's hitting. Not many things are getting out of the way of that. Claws again,
Mhm.
it's standard slashing damage, but again, it's extremely accurate. But then you get to its tentacles, 15-foot reach, 15 plus 15 to hit. Not a huge amount of damage, but if the target is huge or smaller, it's grappled.
Yeah, it just is
No,
grappled.
make a save.
No, just
It's like,
grappled.
shit, you grappled. You can try a save on your own turn. The dragon can have up to 4 targets grappled
Mhm.
at a time. That's just,
So I even look at the like you look at the picture like it's gross.
yeah.
It's, to be grappled by it with no, like, you can try and get out of it, but if you're a little weak wizard, You ain't getting out of that with a DC 18. Be hard. Be very hard. Unless you got some magic dice. Um, and again, like it's the aethylic tadpoles, right? So get sprayed, they get in your brain, they do damage. Like at the start of each of your turns, I believe. Yeah, it does say that. Start of each of your turns, it does damage, and if you drop to 0 hit points, you stabilize. You're not dying, but you are unconscious while the freaking worm takes over your body, drills into your brain, and takes you over your body and turns you into a squid face. Like it is rightfully terrifying, and I love it. Um, it
I
is
love
great.
that little caveat at the end. Casting a wish spell on the unconscious creature
Yeah.
into every infestation prevents it from turning into a mind flayer. All right, if you've just casually got the wish spell to just use that way. I mean, to be fair, if I had the wish spell, I'd just wish to not fight that thing. Uh, have you seen the legendary action
Mhm.
Shatter Concentration?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Gonna get to it.
Just while it's grappling any player that's has a concentration spell that they're maintaining like an uptime on, you can just say, nope, you break concentration. Oh, and by the way, you take a bunch of psychic damage because that really gave you a headache.
Yeah,
Just, oh god. I
it
think
is
the
rough.
the terrifying side of this is like if you think of this in a campaign setting,
Hmm.
you could have like hordes of mind flayers suddenly besieging some large city, and it's like, where did these come from? And as the players went to investigate these settlements, they find them completely bereft of people, like nobody there. And then eventually they realize that an elder brain dragon is just being soaring the skies, unleashing its tadpole brine breath and
Unleashing it.
infecting entire towns to become colonies of mind flayers instead of people.
It's
That's terrifying.
spraying its load everywhere. Yeah.
Rivers of ejaculate.
They are tadpoles, bro. They are tadpoles. Um, but yes, yeah. It's one of those where it's BBEG quality monster. Like maybe it's not the mind behind whatever is going on, but it is it. Well, I guess it is because it is. It's a brain. There's a brain inside. It's got a brain stuffed inside it. So yes, it probably is the brain behind it all, and that makes it even more terrifying. Um, would love to throw this at my players, especially you, Rob. See what you would do. Because it'd be a rough fight. Definitely a campaign long enemy, one that you make
Yeah,
recurring enemy.
and we all know that's how you make the best uh, big evil bad guys.
Big evil bad guys. Yes, for those who don't know, BBEG, big
Big
bad
bad.
evil guy. Right? I know it's
Oh
just what.
god, I guess,
No god.
typically.
Big bad evil girl. But I guess like it's quite a good segue into one of our topics, which is what's the best BBEG that you've come across, and why is it Strahd? As it was put in the notes. Uh, One of the very good reasons for to vote Strahd is one of the best, at least the best that we've come across, so we can say on our opinion, or based on our opinion, on our experience, is because he's a reoccurring.
Yes. Um, so I think I'll try and not use too many spoilers just in case any of my other players are watching because we will be starting Ghost of Strahd probably in a month or two.
Or anybody who in general is going
Oh
to play.
yes, but it's probably something that is not going to be a secret that Strahd is a hands-on bad guy.
Mhm.
He's a bully. He's there to be the constant thorn in the party's side. Um, Terrifyingly so because he's very strong. He is a what challenge rating is he? I think is he like 19 or something?
He'd be up there, won't he? He'd be
He
decent.
doesn't like his stat block doesn't look like it should be quite as high until you realize just how versatile of a combatant he is. and like it is designed, using all the various effects that he can bring to the table. He's got great motivations, trying to tread carefully here without giving too
Yeah.
much away.
Yes. Avoid that
Uh,
one.
he's got uh, he's got the charisma in many ways.
Yes.
Uh, he often gets depicted as the big sexy vampire. Um, there is a trope there. He's essentially Dracula.
Mhm.
If anybody watching has never heard of Strahd before, um,
Count
and
Strad von Zarovich.
yes, he is. He honestly, the thing that shocked me most about playing that campaign, I know when I say shocked me, I think in a good way, not in a bad way, is if you have a successful session zero, which is probably something we could talk about for the next hour if we really, really wanted.
Mhm.
If you have the right session zero, your players are going to know that the campaign setting is it's gothic horror. It's designed to feel a little hopeless a lot of the time. It's designed to be quite grueling, and the players know the campaign is called The Curse of Strahd. He's there in the in the name. He is the bold name in the title. The headline, I should say, is what I was trying to think of there, but was struggling. So he's going to be present from start to finish, uh, and it's really good watching your players engage with that. When, because if you, the kind of DM that puts voices on, when you bust out that Strad voice
Yeah.
and you just see if you're around at a physical table or if you with your players on webcam on over Discord or whatever um, app is your choice, and you just see their faces and you hear the audible groans or sighs. And I mean, some of the stuff that I did to you guys
Mhm.
broke the Geneva Convention several times.
Yeah.
Made multiple of you shed tears and would get text messages after the session saying that was amazing, thank you. And I'm like, but I made you cry. Well,
You want to feel emotion. Everyone wants to feel emotion.
I know, I know, I know, I know.
Good
I'm
storytelling.
more jesting with that, but
Yeah.
everybody knows they're going to get. It's like everybody goes in knowing they're going to get the shit kicked out of them, and is thankful that they do. And it's such a weird situation, and you hear so many horror stories about Curse of Strahd, and I think that's one of the potential pitfalls is not finding that balance between how you run the campaign, and it's not always a new player friendly campaign. Because it can be difficult, at least to a certain point.
Mhm.
Um, but if you run it right, I think it's incredibly rewarding. And any bad guy that is present throughout the entire campaign as a force is just something that I think is probably the most rewarding for both DMs to run and players to experience. Um, there are other kind of bad guys to run, secret bad guys that pull the strings from the shadows. But I think even if I was doing one of those types, which is a completely different archetype, I would probably still use henchmen that were recurring
Mhm.
um, and were a face. And to be fair, there are those types that you could typically use in Curse of Strahd as well,
Mhm.
which we won't name because people will encounter them in their own time.
Yeah. I can only say what it's like from the player's perspective with Strady Boy, and every time like you'll be walking down the road and he turns up, you're always like, oh, what is it this time? What is going to happen this time? Who are you going to kill? Who is your plaything? Who are you going to wind up? Who are you going to break? Um, and it feels like there is a constant force working against you when you've got Strad, because it always feels like you there's something else going on
Yep.
constantly,
Mm.
and if you're lucky enough to have a good DM like we do, we did, I guess, do on and off do, like Rob, um, that uh, you can portray it in the subtleties of just the how manipulative he is,
Mm.
um, and straight away you just know that like he knows everything that's going on. He has spies everywhere. He doesn't have to tell you. It's just the way that he is. Um, and the fact that he like, I don't think we could probably talk about something without it being spoiled, right? Which, if I was to say like the whole what
The
happened to
wisdom save.
Goldie, right?
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, I get you. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. The thing that happened to Goldie, I mean, that was partly Goldie's doing anyway.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's not a designed part of the campaign. So yeah, you can talk about it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we had a player who who decided that when Strad had turned up and he was just talking, and so far Strad had generally just been a bit of a talk. We had fought him, I think, once before where he killed somebody, but
Didn't go well, the
it
fight. It's
didn't go
safe to
well.
say that the fight didn't end in victory for the players.
But neither did this one either. This one did not end in victory because he was talking and he was just he didn't it didn't feel like he was threatening us at all, despite it being Strahd, who is a
I think it
threat.
was quite clear to most that he had turned up to antagonize and talk.
Mm,
There's always the threat of violence, but
sure,
it's
he wasn't presenting as a threat anyway. No weapon drawn, no claws drawn, no teeth, no magic being thrown at us.
he was there
But
to gaslight you.
one of our players, of course, was so intimidated by the presence of Strahd, uh, called upon the magic of his god to try and sacred flame him. Right? It was something like a cantrip. It wasn't even something like
It didn't start with
impressive.
that. It started with him raising his crossbow, and he shot the driver of the carriage
That's right.
that Strad had turned up in, without naming names and characters and so forth
Hmm.
and so on. And the driver of the carriage turned and looked at who is obviously his lord, and it was a bit like, "Can I do something about that?" And then I didn't really get the chance to get many more words out in
For
describing the
sacred flame.
situation before someone, Goldie, shouted, "Sacred flame!" and just he pretty much did what stereotypically bad players do, and like rolled his dice straight away. Uh, and at that point, it was just, all right, roll initiative.
Yeah. Uh, uh, it was it was it was a moment. Um, it was that moment as well where old Strahd learnt that my character had counterspell in his back pocket with that fight
Yep,
as well, which could have been held for a later date, but it is what it is.
that was a good moment.
But I thought that was like he Strahd had messed with us already, and the mood was set, the theme was set. That like I don't blame the player really. I thought it was funny looking back. Maybe not funny for some players, including himself, who was
If
deceased
there were
thereafter,
consequences,
or or for one of our other players, Steph, who was also slain, but Strahd had his fun and
yeah,
continued to play games with her afterwards, as she was a dampier thereafter. But it
yeah. Oh, and
yeah, but it just shows you like this. It was great as well because like with we felt at that point in that game that he was well beyond us. We stood no chance. But then
he was.
when you get later game and you're like, he's still tough, and he was, he was tough. We still, it still felt like we had a chance though. We had a
Yeah.
chance at the end. It was good. The progression worked. The way I assume it's done in the book, or the way that you did it at least.
Uh, I definitely had to buff him at the
Hmm.
end, um, in certain ways. Well, I'll tell you what I never buffed. I never buffed his damage output. His damage output is obscene.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that's why he's got such a high challenge rating. But one of the things is that, and I think it's an ongoing theme, in my opinion, that I know we've talked about this before off camera, where a lot of creatures' HP pools feels on the low side.
Mhm.
Um, and that's probably a topic for another time. But he definitely had buffed HP.
Mhm.
Um, but Yeah. Well, by the end, he didn't need it in the beginning
Mhm.
because that's the thing when you start. He never has any. He doesn't have an evolving stat block. It's just you just have to use it with a bit of common sense and not absolutely kill everyone when every time you have a fight. He's there to be that bully. He's there to put you in your place and laugh at you while doing so. And God, it's fun. It's really fun. Mm.
He is. I just remember some some great scenes, even when my character sadly passed um in a in an incident involving his own foot, and I got to take over as a new character, and his first encounter with to Tor, my light cleric, his first encounter with Strahd, where he turned up in the camp, um, was was unique, and it was just like the two butting heads a little bit, but um, definitely Tora taking it seriously, um, and seeing this undead foul abomination, um, as and putting himself between him and putting himself between Strahd and the other players as well to take on this thing, and Strahd just laughing it off and finding it hilarious.
And not
Uh,
quite. You didn't quite react the way Goldie did, though. Thankfully.
no, I knew better. And I think Tor was just like, give me the opportunity. Um, and then
Yeah, that was a good one.
and then he did some things later on during a particular fight where he didn't give me the opportunity. Snuck in there. Coward Destrades. Um, but no.
Opportunist, I think you mean.
Opportunist, sure, yes. But yeah, good, he was a good BBEG.
Yeah, for
Makes a good
sure. I mean,
BBG.
I think it's not the reason I phrased the topic the way I
Mm,
did is I mean Strahd will always have a special place in my heart 'cause I love vampires, most vampires.
yes.
Mm. Um, so it was always going to be some like gothic horror as a setting with the undead and everything it just adds to the reasons that I would love Strahd, but at the same time, it's just the mechanics of everything. If you are running a homebrew campaign and you have um, a recurrent bad guy, and the players get to find out that that bad guy is far beyond them,
Hmm.
there's a certain satisfaction for sure that comes from watching the players a grow to hate that bad guy, uh, grow to be wary of their presence. And you might not do it quite the same where as you do in Barovia, where, like you said, it's a very oppressive presence. But it's that, like I said earlier, it's that as soon as they hear that voice or they become aware of that whatever the bad guy is that you're doing the same sort of thing with, it's just that rewarding reaction from your players. Mm.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. You definitely had fun with that.
yeah,
Yeah, it's funny because I think back to the games that I've run.
yeah.
A lot of time with campaigns, I've either had to cut them short, or they've just not got to the end point where you get to fight the BBGs. It's actually, I'm sure it's quite common, really, is to you never get to that final
Mhm.
hurrah. Um, but I think,
And some campaigns can take years to get to
of
the
course,
end.
yeah. The I'm trying to think. We had shorter ones, and then that have kind of had BBEGs to some degree. But I think that with the only real one I think I enjoyed quite a bit was when we did what I call the Nuri campaign,
Oh yeah,
when we had this well, the champion of malice, the champion of the evil god essentially,
yeah.
um, who is actually as it turns out possessed by a pit fiend, and you guys basically find out where they were hiding out, saw what they're up to, and he was doing his monologue, going around sacrificing cultists as he
Mm.
was doing it, and I was very curious to see how long it would take for you guys to step in, especially because we'd had the discussion of don't interfere with the bad guy's monologue before.
Yeah, we do have, or did have one or two players that liked to cut off the bad guy, and again, I think that's kind of a discussion you could have for a while. But like,
Hmm.
there's a balance because you want the role play to be satisfying and meaningful, but you also want to give the players the satisfaction of like being like, no, shut up, fireball.
Yeah,
um, but that's why Counterspell's such a great spell.
it is. It is. But, with my big bad evil guy, uh, he was homebrew. Like he was mostly
Yeah,
homebrew. I essentially took a warlock of the fiend, which comes from, well, nowadays it comes from Monsters of the Multiverse because they did a revamped one. Um,
Fiend is his handbook, is it not?
it's Warlock of the Fiend. I think it's from Volos originally.
Oh, you mean an actual creature?
Yeah, it's an actual stat block in the book.
Oh, I didn't. I thought
Um,
you just um, applied some actual player character traits from the regular Warlock of the
no, no,
Fiend.
I took it from that and expanded. So I took the Warlock and I took a lot of stuff from the Pit Fiend, and I crammed them all together into one individual, since he was slowly becoming the Pit Fiend. And at the time, and I still think today to some degree, I was very concerned with the idea of a fight being three-dimensional, both
Yeah,
on the maps, and but also with what's going on within the room. So we had sort of a whole experimental summoning type deal going on, uh, and your actions and what you did would affect the room around you, and there was the bolts of energy and magic coming out and striking things, and basically it didn't have to end the way it did, but there was a good chance that if this experiment, this crystal thing, this
yeah,
orb, overloaded, it would blow up the entire castle you were in and a good section of the nearby town, um, which led
yeah.
to a very good sort of movie style getaway sequence at
The
the
escape
end.
sequence was really good, especially when you learn afterwards that my character Narakis was on 2 HP the entire time.
Yeah, yeah. You stayed behind to like it was you, wasn't it? You stayed behind to sacrifice, basically almost like as a sacrifice. I'm going to try and fix this. But Luke, my brother, his character, the sorcerer, he was there with the magic broom, and he was like, gonna get him out of here,
Yeah,
and he
yeah,
did.
he was there to save us, and we managed to fly out through the explosion, um, dodging falling chunks of rock. I think any one of those would have put me out.
Yeah. The great thing as well with that is that it took sacrifice, and that's what really I liked about some of the
Yeah,
stories you told me of games you'd played and stuff like that. Of the idea of there's going to be this big explosion because you hadn't prevented it. It had been allowed to happen, and but the only way to sort of hold it off to allow you guys to escape and any of the civilians that were in the castle to escape was you sacrifice magic items.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. It was an interesting situation when we Narakis was using his artificer knowledge. Zenkris gave up the wand that was his birthright.
well, he considered
And,
it to be his right.
well, yeah, potato tomato.
Yeah,
And
he gave up the thing that was a catalyst to his magic.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It'd be interesting to go back to that campaign eventually.
Mhm,
Perhaps when your brother's more available, and
mhm,
we can have him for that as well. If you'd have run that fight now,
mhm.
so now that you've gone through all of Curse of Strahd, you've DM'd multiple like miniature campaigns, would you do anything differently?
Would I have done anything different? There would have been small things that I would have done differently. I would have made certain things clearer. Um, it was great because with the entire campaign, we had so many learning points, like of when like things like when to run from a fight has always been I love to try and get players to do that so they understand that's a possibility. You don't always have to stay and fight. You can run. Um, but we had loads of like learning opportunities about when you go down, it's not the end, and you can be brought back, um, and a lot of players learned about the whole like let your boss monologue a bit.
Yeah.
Don't feel the need to have to rush into everything. Um, but there were certain things I think, especially with the sacrificing, I should have made it a bit clear what was going on when he was like
Yeah.
killing these cultists, so that essentially he can try and create a body for his dark god to come through into the world.
Yeah.
Um, that could have been clearer. Maybe a little better communication from my point of view. Um, though there were some things where you guys were doing rolls and the rolls just weren't your forte or were just not in your favor when you were trying to figure some stuff out.
I think
Um,
it's one of those things that sometimes having DM'd as well is it makes you second guess things. So as a DM, I appreciate players that let me monologue. So I was letting you monologue.
mhm.
And we all were at that point, I think, because
I
we knew it was
appreciate it.
time to fight.
It's great. Do it. Please let me monologue. But I should have made
But
it
even
clearer
then,
that this is one you could interview.
yeah, but how would you make that clear? Because at the end of the day, like he was sacrificing things. For all I knew,
Mhm,
mechanically, as putting myself in the DM's shoes on that situation, he wasn't going to be the boss. He was summoning the boss.
mhm.
Like that's kind of I think that's probably what I thought at the time. I can't fully remember now going back.
Can't stop you from metagaming, bro. What am I supposed to?
Yeah, but no, but that's the thing. Like I suppose that is one thing that if we had interrupted, if he was summoning the boss anyway, it would have happened in some way, shape, or form. But yeah, I don't know. I'm sure there's maybe is a way you could have made it clearer, but we were rolling. Rolls weren't good.
Mhm.
What was that creature that we had to fight in the doorway?
The Narzagon, the Hell Knight, I think is what they are.
Is
Um,
it just like one of those dark paladins, but on a nightmare? Is that what it is?
well, the Dark Paladins that you fought were homebrew creations of mine. They again, as with a lot of my homebrew creations, it was a I think they're called Blackguard beefed
Yeah.
up. That was my these Dark Paladins that I had. He was something from a book. I can't tell you which one it was. A monster from one of the books. And it's yeah, they're depicted in the book riding a nightmare, and they're
Ah, fair.
knights, and they're covered in armor, and they looked cool. And I thought, who would be a great position to be kind of like this ultimate dark paladin? Like of all the
Yeah,
paladins you fought, this guy would be great, and he could hold the line a bit while the champion did his evil deeds under the watchful gaze of Malice himself through the portal
yeah.
with
With a, like that
his
mirror that we were
yeah
peering into his I suppose his plane of hell. Because
yeah
your world works slightly different to canon D&D.
mhm
I think one of my favourite parts about not just the end fight, but like the end of that campaign
mhm
was when we met. I can't remember his name now. Um, Susie's character's dad.
Oh, now you're asking. Oh my God, his name is gone for me completely. I know who you
But he
mean.
was just sat there in a room because he'd been basically cash rolling
Hmm.
everything, hadn't he? So at that point, we chat outside of the game, and you knew that he was one of the people that I thought was going to end up as the BBEG, and because we
Something
hadn't
Orin.
met him yet. Yeah, it was just Lord Orin, I think, to us,
Yeah, Lord Orin probably to you. Yeah.
um,
Yes, gone.
or Baron Orin, or whatever status he had.
Yeah.
And we learn all the things that we learn about the Cloaked Cabal. So then when we find him and the creatures guarding his door were just, instead of attacking us, were
Hmm.
just like, no, the boss wants to see you. That threw everybody.
It did.
It was a
I,
really good moment. I can't remember. Did you cliffhanger the session there, or did we just go straight in and have a word? I think you cliffhangered the session.
I think I cliffhangered the session once you went through the door.
Yeah, I think we became aware of who we were seeing um, before going down into the caves underneath the castle and doing the final encounter that we were just speaking about. But
Mm,
um, it was just a very interesting concept because we had multiple potential BBEGs. Because again, you were running it not totally different to Strad because we'd
mm,
met this um, servant of malice, this champion of malice,
mm.
several times, but it was somebody whose identity was not known. A little bit like the collector so far.
Yes, yes, yeah.
And so we still had a similar satisfaction as with Strad, although he was definitely way less hands on than Strad because we just met him a few times and he did quite catastrophic things.
Hmm.
So we were rightfully so guessing who that might be and trying to find out and trying to investigate as much and interrogate as much servants of malice that we could find to try and figure it out. And I would always brainstorm whilst gaming with you,
Hmm.
probably much to your self satisfaction and chuckling that I had X amount of incorrect theories. Um,
Fun of it,
so it
bro.
was good to meet him. It was good to see his motivations, to
Hmm.
see that he was looking for a safe out. Um, that he had. It was a nice thing to see that divide of zealotry and selfish financial gain.
Yeah,
And like how those motivations can be completely different. And it's almost, without getting too political, it's like capitalism versus religious, like
yeah,
zealotry, and it's those sorts of um, yeah. It's just very interesting to see how those different things played out and how one wanted to avoid uh, their doom because they had seen that their side probably wasn't going to win,
yeah,
was being too reckless. Yeah, I
yeah.
really
He was always the guy to put his money, behind who he thought was going to be the winner, essentially. And then he was like, "Oh, I bet on the wrong horse. I'll give you all the information you're looking for, tell you where everything is, uh, and you let me go." And you did, because you had more important things to do. Um,
yeah.
and it was, yeah, it was fun because like you guys had like, especially listening to you or to my brother, and like listening to you guys just like not knowing who people were, but you were suspecting like different people and the ideas, and then be able to catch up. Because I love a good twist. I love a good
You
turn,
do.
and I do it as much as I can. Um, to the point now, I think it's become expected, so it might not work anymore. Uh,
Yeah, we're looking for them now. That's the
yeah,
problem.
yeah. Got to try and outsmart you guys.
The twist is there's no twist at all. It's all straightforward.
That would be one of them. But yeah, I liked the intrigue of it, and I liked to tie things back around, so everything was supposed to come back around again. Even if originally when I first did it, it didn't tie in, I would have ultimately bring it back round, which obviously is the complications when you do homebrew. because in a pre-written campaign, it's all generally thought of, though, as I think Rob learned from Strahd. Not everything is written in the book.
No, no, it is not. That's one thing that was definitely challenging about running Strad is because you can read the book as much as you like. You know, it's in a box at the minute now in its little collector's edition
Hmm.
box, but you know, it's a nice chunky book, but it leaves stuff up to the DM, but sometimes it doesn't tell you it's leaving stuff up to the DM.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the slightly frustrating things about it. The book itself was laid out not in an amazing fashion, but saying that because it can be quite a sandboxy world, I'm not sure that there's a better way to lay the book out. So that's just more of a mild grievance. But there's certainly parts in there where I remember we were at the end. You guys were doing end game stuff. You guys were doing spoilers, and I found out that um, there was something. There was a spoiler that was available at the start that could have been more impactful to the campaign. Um, and it felt like a bit of a missed opportunity.
Hmm.
Very quickly let that frustration go because it wasn't like it was something that I felt was missing. It's
Hmm.
just when you find out like, oh, that was a thing all along. I could have used that. And there's just a few little bits as well, like, and it's kind of reading ahead is something that will only help you so much because there are so many little bits to read depending on what the players do, the way it's laid out in a book, and some of the little text boxes that it says read to the players is like describes it as suddenly raining outside,
Hmm.
where none of the text boxes have described it that way
No.
so far. So like when you're reading it and you're trying to just read it outside whilst also reading it yourself, not for the first time, but
Yeah.
definitely for the first time that session, because I did read the majority of the book well beforehand. Um, it throws you off because you're like, oh, hang on a minute. It's not raining because I didn't say it was raining, but I'm just saying it's raining, so it's now raining. Forget that bit, guys. And it kind of just breaks the immersion a bit, and it can be a bit frustrating. But that is the challenge.
Yeah. Oh, it's my experience with pre-written stuff. Obviously, is, as I said, Lost Mines and Horde of the Dragon Queen, which never got particularly far in. Um, and you don't. It's like, how much do you want to read ahead sometimes? Because like you probably skim everything and then read the first bit. No, it's a long, it's a big book. Um, you kind of feel like if you get too far ahead, you're going to be caught up in the stuff that's going on there. You're not going to remember the stuff that you need to remember from where they are now. And you're just going to get all confused, all messed up, all muddled up and confused. It's best just to stick maybe like a chapter ahead of of where they are. Um, but then yeah, even with homebrew stuff, like you will be reading whatever you've written as a
Mm,
DM. Like you're gonna read
that's
from a
true. Yeah.
book, or you're gonna read from notes that you've
Mm,
got. Like
mm,
you're always gonna have some reading or some notes. You can't remember everything that you've written as much as I try to, and a lot of it is up here. Most of it's up here, and there's stuff that I'd never check my notes for. Um, but there's got to be times where you're gonna go, right, where are we? Oh, that's where we are. We're doing this. Wait a minute, it's raining. When did I write that? Oh, when did it say that?
yeah. Yeah. It
That happens.
kind of things that you don't necessarily think to prepare for. And like you were saying, you know, like you can even in homebrew, you've written notes about, let's say, you've written notes about a village that your players have been to, and you've written that there is a blacksmith's forge which
Hmm.
is run by I don't know some copper dragonborn that's working the bellows or whatever, and you've given them a name, and then you name all the other NPCs that run the tavern, run the shops, local leader of the Adventurers Guild, all that sort of stuff, and you put all that effort in, and then you take a year-long break,
Yeah.
and you go back and you're like, um,
No.
"It was raining."
Yeah, it happens in a week though. Like you could just have a week go by and you'd be like, "So you were here? I think you did this.
Yeah.
I think you short rested. I think you long rested. What does your character sheet say?" Um, or yeah, it
Or you can
happens.
tell all the players to take a long rest, and you come back and only half of them did press the button on D&D Beyond if that's what you're using, and they're like,
Hmm.
"Did we get a long rest?" It's like, "I hope so, because
Yeah.
player X and player Y have had a long rest. So if you haven't, then you're doing yourself a disservice."
Hmm. Right.
Yeah. That's definitely a thing.
But since
But yeah,
we kind of covered one of the topics on the list, but I think we can go into it a little more detail. It's definitely good for people who want to be a dungeon master or a game master if it's not Dungeons and Dragons that you're interested in. And that's just generally about how we approach building encounters. But
that's definitely a subject. But
it is a
yeah,
subject.
go first.
Amigo, very sure, yeah, yeah. It depends on the situation, largely.
It
But if we keep it simple, say we'll start with what we call random encounters, right? So random encounters are usually a table of encounters. You roll a dice, and whatever the outcome is what do you choose from that table, and that's what happens. If I'm building a random encounter for that, I'm looking at monsters that I want you to fight and that fit in with wherever the players are. And there's not much more to it than that's a good monster for them to fight.
Yeah,
It's not gonna do. It's gonna whip out some damage, but it's not gonna do too much because it's a random encounter. We don't want to kill the players. We just want to inconvenience them, and they're great for on the
it's
road and stuff like that. If
random
it's
encounters are an interesting concept because quite often they'll also randomize the number of, let's just say, as happened many times,
mhm,
wolves show up.
mhm.
Um, there's a they might say 3d6 wolves, and that could be anywhere between 3 and 9.
Yeah,
Well, no, 3 and 18, if I actually do my maths correctly. So yeah, that's can be quite a swingy fight. But if you're designing a homebrew fight, what would
mhm.
you do to prep for that?
For if we're talking random encounters,
Well,
or
random or just one that you've decided is happening.
decided when it decided to happen. Well, because I'm very with the campaign that we played last, I'm very story focused. So I generally know if it's fits in with a story for you to come across characters at a particular moment and whether or not they would be a threat.
Yeah.
Um, but usually, I will go. What will be a really interesting location for players to fight in,
Mm.
and what monsters, if monsters in any term, whether they be humans or whatever, what wouldn't be the most logical to be in the situation, or what would fit narratively in that situation, and um, how are they going to engage the players? I don't, as the old proverb says, a plan doesn't survive contact with the enemy. So I don't plan out the fight in any particular details, just general behaviors.
Yeah.
It would be like a bullet point on this guy will be more reserved, more conservative, or this guy might lead the charge as a vanguard. I I like to have interesting maps. It's something I'm very focused on. Is that I like, as I said, to create an interesting environment for the fight to be in, and I feel like almost like it should be a puzzle in of itself.
Yeah.
So if we think about the one that I often think of is when you guys went into a brewery where you found out they were producing the black ooze that was being used to basically contaminate people with the dark magics of malice.
Yeah.
Um, I knew there was no real. I didn't want any fight. I wanted you to be working your way through the rooms, discovering lore and information. That the encounter that I wanted would come into the main area because I had balconies, and I had vats, and I had barrels of booze leaking out, and I had places for people to hide, players and characters. I wanted to make sure that as I've, and I still make the mistake regularly, is how I use too many monsters in a fight.
Yeah.
So I think by that point in that campaign, I come to a good balance, and I knew what, and I was in a better position. Unlike what I recently just did and just threw an entire army at you, which is my mistake. I will learn. Um,
That
but
was just time consuming though. That was the only thing.
yeah,
Like it felt great. It just ended at like 2:30 in the morning or
yeah,
something.
it was a
So
late one. But with that brewery fight, I wanted it so that there were some enemies that there was a good shot that you guys would be sneaky. You'd had a bit of a history of being. You weren't running there guns blazing. You had a bit of a sneaky side to you. So I always had these like lower level guys that were not really a threat. They were just there to kill and kind of trap you to
yeah,
um expose you from your stealth by shooting, casting spells. So then my stronger enemies, my dark paladins, um, could take the opportunity to do their mutation and turn into the big ugly creatures that they could. But yeah, I see an encounter much like I see a puzzle.
yeah.
Take into account the
I think
map, what's in the room, and how is it to be solved. It's not my decision to solve it. It's not up to me to solve it. I just create a problem and give you guys a shot at solving it.
I think the map is a very good point to make. I've made encounters, and the encounters. When I say encounters, I'm always talking about combat. Really, role play encounters are a totally different topic. But
Hmm.
I've made encounters that were enjoyed by the players, but I still felt weren't successful because I made an entire map, and because the players sometimes can get quite tunnel visioned on just beating the enemies, the map stagnates and it becomes a quarter of the full size because nobody leaves like
Hmm.
the smaller areas. So I think that's something to definitely consider when you are planning an encounter is the puzzle of the map and adding layers to it and making sure you remember to interact with it yourself as well to almost show the players that they need to interact with it as
Hmm.
well. So like get bad guys up on balconies or
Hmm.
then your melee units need to get up there,
Hmm.
or your ranged spellcasters or rangers or whatever it is you've got need to deal with that threat. I think when I'm starting to plan an encounter, if I'm going full homebrew, if I'm building a one shot, or if I'm running an entire campaign and I know that the players are going to have X amount of fights in this dungeon or in this situation that they find themselves in, every fight I do, I always need to first of all understand what am I achieving with this fight. Is this fight designed to show them the things that they are fighting, to give them information, or just simply act as the pure fact that the place that they are trying to pass through, or the bad guy that they're trying to reach at the end of this dungeon, still has things populating this dungeon,
Hmm.
so they would, you're not going to walk through an empty place. So, like you said earlier, it's almost to inconvenience players, but also, it's combat's fun, so
Hmm.
it is part of the fun. So when you're thinking about the encounter, choose what it is that you want that encounter to reward, whether it's knowledge, whether it's just beating some enemies that would otherwise cause more of a problem later on if you got to the end of the dungeon and they were still there.
Yeah, I think
um,
you're right. It's goal is what is the goal of
yeah,
what is the purpose of the encounters? Probably one of the
yeah,
first things to do. Whether it is to open the town gates to let everyone else in,
yeah.
as we did recently. Um,
With the orcish one, yeah,
the orc, yeah, with the orc adventure. Whether it's to discover what's being done, what's going on in the brewery, and deal with uh, the machinations of the enemy.
and then I think you obviously you need to spend some time focusing on what creatures the players will be coming up against. and to really balance that as well as you want. And by the way, not every fight has to be balanced. Some fights can be easy, s- make your players feel powerful. Some fights, like Strad, can be
Hmm.
not necessarily unwinnable, but designed to reach a point where it feels that way. Um, but for more of a standard encounter, which is going to involve multiple creatures that the players need to either convince to not fight them, or beat them in a fight, or do something similar. It, I would say the first hurdle is knowing your pie.
Hmm.
Uh, how do they act? What's the what's the dynamic of the group? Is there a paladin? You always need to know that because those smite crits, you've got to watch out for them. You've got to watch out for those. How many times I've put a monster in a fight with my party, and the paladin's just critted and then dealt a massive smite. And to be fair, Felicity the Rogue did that a couple of times as well,
Hmm.
where the creature, the more central creature, the strongest enemy that might be surrounded by underlings, suddenly just gets three-quarters of their HP knocked off in a single
Hmm.
attack by a single player. So be aware of the max damage output of your players, but also be aware of all their max HP, you need to think, how much damage do I want to do to them in a
Hmm.
turn? What am I going to put on the field, and how many things am I going to put on the field? Because action economy is also uh, one of those elements that can really take players by surprise. So if you've got a single chunky giant or ogre or whatever that is only doing 1 to 3 attacks a turn, even if they're very damaging, that fight can be that damage can be mitigated by utility spells, by
Hmm.
control magic, by uh, features and abilities like Battlemaster features of
Hmm.
battlefield control. A lot of classes will have ways to at least slightly subdue a single enemy. Whereas if you put 10 goblins in front of your party that can fire off 10 to 20 shots a turn, um, with short bows or slings or throwing axes or javelins or whatever, if they all decide to focus on something, they're gonna take that player down. So it's just kind of deciding the way they're going to act, the amount of impact you want to have on the fight. How are you going to split them up? So are they all going to take their turn at the same time, or are they going to take their turns separately in the initiative order? Um, because that can be very oppressive if suddenly 10 things suddenly act. As I said, if a player has put themselves in the only logical place where all the creatures that they're facing would attack them, there's a high likelihood that they're going to get hit with everything.
Hmm.
Um, so again, that goes back to the environment, the map. But you're really looking at opportunities as well to, in that kind of puzzle that you described, you want opportunities to make players shine. Not every fight needs to be an opportunity for every player in the group to shine. Otherwise, they'll end up fighting for the opportunity without even realizing it. You need to challenge your players. And again, it's not about always thinking of what you want the answer to the puzzle to be, but giving them something that they can solve in multiple ways.
Yeah, agreed. I think with for pure mechanics, I suppose, numbers to look at it is be wary of your player. Probably the lowest HP, the hit points player you've got, who is
Yeah,
actually the squishiest, and what is the average damage output of your enemy. Um, their hit points are flexible, shall we say? Um, but
yeah,
you, if you wanted to be noticed, this guy turns up and he's on his own. You're like, we can beat one guy, but you want him to be tough. You want to be making sure that you can do at least take off half hit points on somebody.
Yeah.
on your weakest player.
You need
Uh,
to apply that instant tension
mhm.
by doing that.
So that's really the two main stats to look at are your player's HP and your monster's damage output. I would say. Um, Good idea to pay is also if your monster has spells, keep an eye on what they've got because if they've also got or just their stats in general. So if they've got great movement or they've got something like Misty Step that allows them also to move around a lot, that is something to take into account because there's likelihood that a player who is that weaker player who may have just taken a good smiting himself, uh, if they can't retreat because the movement speed of the enemy um, allows that enemy to keep up with them, it might make that player feel a little bit like they've been targeted.
Yeah.
So it's
It's
something to
about
take into
making
account.
moments of peril, but not overdoing it. I think
Yes,
there's a balance that you can find there.
yes.
Um, I think one of the other things when I'm preparing an encounter as well is you do hit a point. I suppose this kind of goes back to the conversation, like really at the start of the stream where we were talking about new DM tips. Adaptability
Hmm.
is one of the most important things. So you just mentioned a scenario where the players may be walking along the road, they may see in front of them a classic scenario of a downed tree. Suddenly, two bandits jump out of the bushes behind them, cutting off their escape. And you may have designed that encounter to only have those two bad guys.
Hmm.
And if you have ill prepared the encounter, and it suddenly looks like it's going to be way too easy for the players, there's absolutely nothing wrong with balancing the scales. And suddenly, three more bandits burst out of the bushes.
Yeah, yeah.
It's easy to do. It's your players won't know any different. Um, and it's just about building that flowing narrative to the fight. Um, one thing I adapted a long time ago is phased fights as well.
Hmm.
I don't do it for every fight; it becomes cheap then. But
Boss fights.
yeah, I learned. Let's be honest, I learned it from playing World of Warcraft.
Hmm.
Way back in the day when I used to still play that awful game. Um, it, I wasn't playing D&D at the time. I was playing old Warhammer Quest with some friends at a local hobby shop, and I ran like I suppose it would be a one shot. I think it actually carried off over maybe two or three sessions,
Hmm.
and they got to the end of it, and the way that particular game works, the way the magic items work, is you get a lot of one use effects. So players tend to save those up because they know there'll be a boss fight at the end of the adventure, and it kind of it provides the similar threat that we joked about the paladin providing,
Hmm.
i.e., lots and lots of smites to suddenly unload on the boss. So in the games that we were playing that were DM'd by the friend that ran the games, I'd noticed the trend that we just would one shot the things that we came into contact with at the end, and I was like, "Ah, this is an expected, established theme, so let's break that theme." And they did. The first phase, they one turned the first phase. They did the required amount of damage to the creature. The creature fell back. I think it was a big giant. We were playing in person, so I think
Hmm.
it was the big giant model you can get from Games Workshop. I remember it had a cow at its belt. That's how big it was. Um, and they knocked it over, and upon hearing it scream in pain and the cow cry out as the giant fell onto it, goblins came out of cracks in the walls, and that. I can't remember the name of. Oh, is it Anixia? I kind of tried to copy that, like the theme of the fight in World of Warcraft, where you fight the dragon for the first part, it disappears, then enemies come forward and fight you, and then once they're dead, the boss kind of gets back up. In the giant's case,
Hmm.
it's stopped crying in pain, got back up, and put up an even greater fight. And it really kind of taught me that um, how to implement peril, how to put twists in a fight when players have a very specific kind of expected uh, what's the word I'm trying to think of? I suppose just an expectation of chain of events.
Hmm.
It's definitely not the word I was trying to think of, but I'm sure it'll come to me later
Yeah.
once we've stopped streaming. Um, and ways to break that and surprise your players because that always provides enjoyment.
Yeah. Yeah, phases are good. Like I will sometimes, if I am uncertain. So if we're going in with a new party, a new group, and you're uncertain of the your player's knowledge, um, how they play, or sometimes even like what class they're gonna play when you're designing your encounter, I will quite often I'll have my notes. This is the monster I'm gonna use. If it's not homebrew, it just be like this is a link to this thing on D&D Beyond, or it's in this page in the monster manual, and and then I'll have a little note, maybe a couple of bullet points, and one of them might be if this happens, if he dies too quick, this will happen, um, or if in this previous encounter they walked it, and this guy is only a little bit more powerful, not enough to make a difference, then maybe give him a little resistance to something. Um,
Yep,
because being able to adjust on the fly is very important. I think don't once you create an encounter or you are going to play an encounter that is already pre-written, uh, don't be afraid to be flexible.
absolutely. I think one thing that a lot of people forget as well, even experienced DMs, is when you're looking at creatures and it shows their stat blocks in the monster manual. I'm not 100% sure on how they display on D&D. In fact, I can find out because I've still got the Elder Brain Dragon up. Yeah, it does it. It does it the exact same way. So
Mm-hmm.
looking at the hit points of that, it says the average,
Mm-hmm.
which for the Elder Brain Dragon is 350, which is very much on the high side. But it also then says how you would generate that,
Yes.
which is 20d20 plus 140, which it doesn't take a mathematician to look at that and think actually there's a much higher maximum HP available there.
Mm-hmm. They just give the
Um,
average, is what they'll.
they do, but I think a lot of DMs get into the habit of just going, "Oh, that's its HP," because you can
Mm-hmm.
see the average damage as well on their attacks, but nobody seems to really use that as much. I think you look at the HP and you take it, but you look at the damage and I think we think as players think, and we're like, "I need to roll for damage for sure, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily need to roll for the HP." Um, where in actual fact, going back to that really obvious and basic scenario that I mentioned of bandits jumping out
Mm-hmm.
of bushes, that HP doesn't have to be on the low side or the high side or anywhere. Like if you want them to have a lower HP, because what's their day been like? Are you the first lot of adventurers that they've jumped out on?
Mm-hmm.
Have they had to put up a fight? They might have actually taken some hits already, and they might not have recovered. All that being said, they may be the biggest fish in that local pond, and they
Mm-hmm.
may have a lot of HP because they've had to really take care of themselves. So there's nothing a lot. I think what I'm trying to get at is that you see plenty of YouTube videos and conversations being had where people look down upon inflated HP when actually the rules are already in the monster manual to
Oh
show
yeah.
that there is an inflated ceiling to what you look at. So don't be afraid to use it because
Agreed.
good balanced encounter is more satisfying not just for the DM but also for the players because if the players walk every fight, they'll start to get bored. Just as you get bored playing video games that are too easy.
Yeah. Agreed. Agreed. Yeah, because the way that I generally treat HP is I look at I will take the average as this is my starting point. Um, I pretty much would say 90% of the fights, the encounters that I run, players will get to that and then they go and then they'll be like, "Oh, he's looking bloodied,"
Yeah, yeah,
because that's nearly always the way. But that is a marker for me. If most of the time I'm adding, and so, like if I want it to be a big fight, I might just chuck on 100 hit points, and if that goes in a round, I'm like, oh well, maybe a couple more.
yeah.
But there's it can be on the other end. It rarely is on the other end, but it can be on the other end where your players are doing some great stuff, but this guy is outmatching them. Like,
Mm,
so you just go to the sort of the bottom end of their sort of HP
cool.
range, I guess. Uh, Generally doesn't happen. I think I maybe did it once. Um,
Yeah.
uh, I usually really would only do it in a fight where there's lots of enemies because you don't want to have to keep track of every single little person. Sometimes you're like, that was a good hit. Why not? That guy's gone.
Minions are an interesting thing as well. It's an
Hmm.
old D&D rule. It's not in fifth edition, but it's something that I think is good to
Yeah.
use either way. And that's like if you've got lots of what have now become weaker enemies, if your players are a little higher level and they come up because they're still going to potentially come up against goblins,
Hmm.
skeletons,
Whatever.
wolves, other beasts, whatever the weaker stuff in the monster manual. There might still be something big there, like a load of goblins might be with a giant or an ogre or whatever you decide because you're the DM, and it gives you place them all in a nice 40-foot diameter sphere, and the party's got a wizard that likes to use fireball. They'll probably die anyway to the fireball, so it doesn't really matter if their HP is 1 or 25.
Hmm.
So it's just knowing like again that goes back to that. What's your party? What are
Hmm.
they going to bring to the fight? Um, is it likely that those are all going to get absolutely roasted by a fireball on turn one? Um, and let your players enjoy that because it's a fun thing to do as a player. You don't need to do it in every fight, but
No.
giving opportunities to do it is certainly a thing.
Agreed. Agreed. Well, I think, have talked for a considerable amount of time about Dungeons and
We have
Dragons. Who knew that we could do it beforehand and that it'd be a good idea? Uh, so, we will come to an end of our inaugural episode of Octopus Big Dice, a D&D podcast. I thank everybody who tuned in and watched us. The VOD will be going up on YouTube, hopefully tomorrow. If not, it'll be later, uh, the weekend,
just
but
gonna stop you.
hopefully
Make
tomorrow.
sure you get it done before Baldur's Gate drops on
Uh,
PS5 because then all hope is lost.
I will do my best. But it should be um, tomorrow for it to fall on there. Uh, Check out our various socials. So we are on Instagram, Awkwardly Big Dice, YouTube, Awkwardly Big Dice, Twitch, as you are here. Click the follow, Awkwardly Big Dice, and then on Twitter as Awkwardly Big Die due to character limit. Um, I just got the C. But I thank everybody for watching. Hope to see you all next week when we record for episode 2. And yeah, I hope all your dices roll natural 20s. Peace.
Have a good one. Thanks for joining.